your sidewalks.
Sounds good. So my name is Catherine Rohan. I'm a transportation planner with the city of Eugene. I work on pedestrian and bicycle projects with Reed. I started earlier this month. So this is my first ever community or neighborhood association meeting. So it's nice to meet all of you. And Dennis, I actually lived on Donald across from the school for about a year. So I probably rode my bike right by you in Tugman. But I'll hand it off to Reed now.
Thanks, Catherine. Reed Dunbar, City of Eugene, Public Works Engineering. I'm also a transportation planner. We are thrilled to have Catherine on board. We're working together on a lot of walking and biking projects, and tonight we're going to talk about one of those in the enhanced walking project, which includes a sidewalk coming to your neighborhood. And just FYI, I live just outside your boundaries. I'm just north of 30th on 27th, and I do a lot of shopping at Albertson, so I come down and check out your hood all the time.
Oh, that's awesome. Good to know where everybody kind of is familiar with. And I invited Leo Folsom, who is a new member of SEN, lives on 33rd. Hi, Leo. Leo's taking care of a infant at the moment.
Hi there. Yep, it's bath time, so I will be off video, but listening. And yeah, thanks for including me.
Well, thank you for coming, and we're excited to have a new member here.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, so first off, we were hoping that Reed could share what plans exist of the new sidewalk install for across from Tugman.
Yeah, great. I'll probably do a lot of the talking tonight just because we are getting Catherine used to the role and how the city responds to various questions, that sort of thing. But she has control of a PowerPoint presentation, which I would love for her to be able to share because that's where all the graphics are. And once we go through this, I think we can make a PDF of this presentation too, and then shoot that out to you guys. But we wanted to be able to go over it. Catherine also did a good job in coloring in some of the features so that this is just a black and white CAD file. So for folks not familiar with CAD, it probably doesn't look like a lot. And so we tried to color in like where the trees were so that you can see what our focus was in providing those sidewalks with as little disturbance as possible to people's front yards. Although we of course can't avoid everything that might be out there. We did manage to avoid most things. So that's awesome.
You should be able to share your screen, everyone in the meeting, if you wish.
Okay, I'll do that now. And I'll go ahead and go into presentation mode. If it'll let me. There we go. Is everyone able to see this okay? Yeah. All right, Reed, you just tell me when to advance.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the next one. So tonight we'll talk about an overview of the sidewalk project. Some of you have already mentioned that there's going to be a future street project. It's a pavement project to replace the pavement on Hilyard Street. We're of course waiting for eWeb to dig that all up and put in a giant pipe. And so that project is going to wait until they are done with that. At which point we also planned on putting some traffic calming in on Hilyard Street as well. It makes the most sense from a financial standpoint to do all of those during the street project. But we got some money from ODOT to do some projects. So if you could give me the next slide. So we got a project which we entitled the Enhanced Walking Network Project, and it's a dispersed project. So we tried to hit a lot of neighborhoods. The northeast part of Eugene is sort of cut out because last year we got a dispersed project up there. So we did like 12 or 15 projects north of the river. But all of the blue projects are enhanced crossings. So those are crosswalks with paint and pedestrian islands and potentially rectangular rapid flashing beacons, those yellow beacons. And all of the green projects are sidewalk infill projects. So as I think most of you are aware, the city of Eugene does not have a sidewalk infill program. And so generally it is the burden of the property owner to update their properties with sidewalks. And as you can imagine, we try not to force people to do that. and we look strategically for opportunities to provide sidewalk connections where it is most important, that being near transit stops, near parks, near schools, and near places where people work or shop. And so one of the locations that came up was the Tugman Park area, because while there is a nice sidewalk that goes through the park, on the other side of Hilyard Street, there is none. And so we had talked about this, I think, for many years as we were scoping out both the East Amazon Bikeway project and then the widening of the sidewalks north of Tugman Park, which will eventually go through Tugman Park as well. We're still looking at some additional monies to widen out that sidewalk through Tugman Park, but that's a different project and that is not this year. So let's go to the next slide, which I think maybe just starts with where the sidewalk is. Yeah, so that line in yellow is where sidewalks will be added, and it closes the gap from where there are existing sidewalks. So starting basically on that north side of Dillard, all the way up to almost 38th, where there is one lot there that has completed sidewalks, but then between 38th and just north of East 36th Place, there are no sidewalks. So as I mentioned, we secured a grant through ODOT. We currently have the plans at ODOT for review because we're using their money. We haven't heard back from them. So tonight I'd like to talk about the timeline, but it's a little unknown right now because we wait for them to basically bless our plans and say, yeah, go ahead and go to bidding. But because we haven't bid it yet, we haven't had a contractor review the plans and give us a timeline for construction. So ideally what's going to happen is we're going to start construction this year in 2022, and it'll be completed in 2023 for all of those projects I just showed. Now, if they start any one of those projects in 2022, we've also asked them to finish those projects. So for example, if they decide to start the Hilyard Street sidewalk project, they also have to finish it in 2022. So we're not halfway done, or we leave something unfinished. It will totally be done. And I will get back to y'all once we have the timeline from the contractor, but we haven't bid the project yet. And so you can see what our problem is we just don't have dates yet that I can share. But that's the extent of the project. What we have next are a series of drawings that show where the sidewalk is going to be placed. And there are a couple notes that I think we'd like to go over as we go through this. As I mentioned, we tried very hard to avoid existing trees that are in people's yards. If there are planters or shrubs, the sorts of things that folks care for and plant, we try to avoid those as well. But our city standard for sidewalks would be to have a setback sidewalk, so not one that's curbside. And that allows people walking to have a little bit more space between moving traffic and walking traffic, and it's generally thought to be more pleasant. The space next to the curb is generally also where a lot of trees live. And so it gives us space for street trees in the future. So sidewalks generally go behind that. And as we go through that, I think you'll notice that we were opportunistic about where the sidewalks were located so that we did not disturb existing plants. Next. So starting all the way on the south end of the project, that line that goes this way at the top is Dillard. And then on this side, it's Hilyard. And you can see that our sidewalk, we're just finishing off a little bit of the sidewalk where it ends. It ends before it actually gets to the corner. So we'll bring the sidewalk all the way to the corner. We'll drop it down at ADA grade, and we'll put a truncated dome in there for tactical detection so that folks know that that's the end of the sidewalk and they're entering the street. I can see Jessica studying it. Sidewalks are typically 5 feet wide, and so these are all 5 feet wide. They're sidewalk, and we pour them about 4 inches deep.
That southern boundary is you getting into that like church below that, right? Is that where I'm like trying to place it here? Sorry.
We are south of Tugman Park here, so we're just south of. Is the church there? I guess I don't know.
I believe that's the corner of the church.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like right at Dillard. South of Dillard is the church.
Then yes, yeah.
Okay,
The church is on, across the street from that.
yeah, okay.
This would be 39th place, I think. Going east and west. If I'm not mistaken.
But it turns into Dillard at some point? Is
Yeah,
just
it turns
labeled
into
different
Dillard
things?
at Hilyard, because that one street goes on the south end of Tugman Park, and that's 39th. And then when it hits Hilyard, it turns into Old Dillard.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's where it is. Next slide, Catherine, is just the north end of that. Did we have the north side of the?
No, that was just the north side of that Dillard and Hilyard intersection is just a standard curb ramp.
Okay,
But with this slide, we did change orientation on you. So north is the right side of the screen, just so
Okay.
everyone knows. There are a lot of lines on these, so it can be tricky to interpret them.
yeah, so north is to the right. If you see the little squares that run from left to right, that is the sidewalk. So we generally pour those in 5x5
Oh,
squares.
okay.
Yeah. And the purple things are driveways. So as part of the sidewalk install, to make sure that people still have access to their driveways, we'll rebuild the driveway aprons, the part that touches the street, and then get that up to grade so that the sidewalk is then flat again, and then pour a little bit more into the property to sort of level that off again so that people can get to their garages or into their yard. So it's not just sidewalks, it's also driveways and making sure that they mesh well with the sidewalks that we're constructing so that they're all at the same level.
But not curbs.
We're not moving any curbs, correct?
You're not redoing any curbs.
Correct.
Would curbs come with the road repave, or would they be left to the old curbs?
Not necessarily. So if a curb has failed, we'll generally be able to get to that during a pavement project. But if the curb is intact, then we generally leave it and then rebuild the street between the curbs.
Are
So it
there any,
depends.
are there any indications of where the trees are? Because
So
I
those are
know,
those big green circles.
The green.
oh, those, okay, because I know there's one really big tree that I passed today.
Yeah,
And I was hoping that the sidewalk could go around it.
it goes in front of it. So yeah,
Okay,
we're hoping
So
not
we're-
to disturb that at all.
great.
Are there trees that will have to come down? I know you're trying to preserve them. but
We
how
just went
far?
through it today and it doesn't look like, it looks like we might have to remove one shrub. Right now, the plan is only to remove just one shrub and potentially a planter box. So
That'd be great.
the yellow note next to that giant green circle
Mhm.
says, so there is a tree that's located right next to that one. And what's going to happen is it says determine the tree roots condition during construction. What we want to do is make sure that when we dig out the grass there to pour the sidewalk, that we're not interfering with the critical root zone of that tree and potentially killing it. So we'll dig that out. We'll have the city forestry folks come and take a look at it. And if that tree is healthy and happy, then we can go ahead and put the sidewalk in there because it won't disturb it. If the tree is unhealthy and it's showing signs of rot and stuff underneath, and it's probably not going to survive very long, then we may end up having to take the tree out. But that's a decision that happens after we've dug that hole, and it happens during the project itself. But we should be able to leave it where it is unless it is not in good condition.
Great. And what has been the outreach like to these people who are the property owners?
So I will be sending them letters. I haven't sent those letters yet, as I mentioned, because we haven't gotten to 100% design. We're still in the design process. But I wanted to get out in front of it and talk to the neighborhood association and let you know that this project is coming. And then I will send letters to each of the property owners, letting them know that we are available for conversations about
Good.
this. And I hope to do that next week.
Next week.
And Reed, I had a question to Jessica's question about the curbs. Are we going to be moving a couple of those lines where there's some plans for bump outs? Would those be new?
I think that's in our presentation, isn't it?
They are, but
Yeah,
that would be a
so-
new curb, an instance of a new curb.
Yeah, we'll show that when those come up. So at the
Okay.
intersections, we do plan on doing some bump outs. And that's to decrease the crossing distance across Hilyard for folks who are trying to cross the street. So I think we can move on to the next one. So north is still to your right. And here there's another big tree. And you can see that the sidewalk is sort of snaking around that tree.
That's probably the one.
Unfortunately, we do have to go curbside right there because to keep that sidewalk straight, we'd have to go through the tree and we don't want to do that. So there will be a little bit of the sidewalk that is curb tight. And then when we have an opportunity to move it back, we're going to do that, but it looks like we're going to cross a driveway before that happens. Generally speaking, we try to keep the sidewalks as straight as possible so that folks with vision disabilities can predict that the sidewalk is just going to keep on going. But in order to preserve some of these trees, and especially the great big ones, our legacy trees, we do have to move around them at sometimes. And this is an instance where we think that these trees are happy. The yellow notes are still there to determine the tree roots condition during construction. So as we're tearing up the ground there, we will go ahead and peek at those trees and make sure that the roots are happy and that we're not going to disturb them with the sidewalk project. And our city foresters, who are tree people, they're foresters, come out and inspect that and won't let us disturb it if it's going to be, if it's potentially going to kill the tree. What they're doing is trying to figure out if the tree itself is happy. And so we may make field adjustments. And for example, on the right side of that driveway, like if that tree, if it needed more root zone, we could potentially move that sidewalk up a little bit, for example, and just give it a little bit more room to breathe. But that would be sort of a field determination based on whatever the roots are doing, which at this point, we just don't know.
So in front of 3851 Hilyard, there is an existing curbside sidewalk. Would that be being replaced?
So it's on the very right-hand side of this drawing. So we're matching right up to that. So that's sort of why it curves down the way that it does, is it matches up with the existing over on the right-hand side.
You mean you're not going to touch the one that's already there to replace
Correct.
it?
That's going to be left as is. We are connecting to it.
Okay. I have some concerns as we get a little. Do you have the next slide that goes a little bit more north?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, also, I guess it does apply to the properties down south. So with a 5-foot sidewalk, and you've got the nice berm between sidewalk and curb, that's looks like I'm trying to figure out how many feet. I can't tell. Maybe another
It's generally
4 or 5.
around 5 or 6.
So that's 10 feet. I mean, I'm looking at like 3885 and 3895. I mean, their whole front yard is basically just going to be sidewalk. That's going to be a major, it's going to be maybe a hard sell for those property owners. I'm just wondering, if there's any consideration about how far that's going towards their front door or anything.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, these are the conversations I expect to have with those properties. I will say again that we don't have a sidewalk infill program currently. And so what we're offering to do here is to pay for these sidewalks free of charge. And so this is a benefit because we could go back in and ask for these sidewalks to be installed. And so we're trying to do the best we can to preserve the existing trees, shrubbery, plant life, and yet maintain some yard space. So if we need to make adjustments, hopefully we can do that after those conversations. But we designed this based on not only where existing objects were, but also to make sure that we had proper drainage of all the sidewalks. And so they are in locations where we can do the proper drainage of all of them and make sure that they're flat and straight.
In those cases where it's close to the people's doors or whatever, could that be closer than to the curb? I know you want to have a space, but between the curb and the sidewalk, but in those cases, could it go closer to the curb?
Potentially. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, from what I understand is that it's public right of way so many feet from the center of the street to where you are having the sidewalk, the property that you're putting the sidewalk on is not the person's property. It is a city public right of way. Am I correct with that?
You are correct. But
Okay.
most folks view that as their yard, and I think rightfully so, because they've been maintaining it.
All these
Right.
years.
So
Well-
the balance is to try to give them a sidewalk and yet allow them the space that does feel very much like personal space, because it has been for so long. But yeah, the right of way on a lot of these streets is a lot wider than
Yeah.
most folks realize.
I wasn't trying to, be negative about it. I think it's any sidewalk we get is awesome. I'm just anticipating that basically it's going to be going halfway up their driveway, which is where they're parked. And so that might be something we want to head off, before they learn that it's going to basically be taking away their driveway parking spaces, like maybe, have another plan that has it right next to the curb, even though it's not as attractive. At least we get a sidewalk. I don't know. If it were my driveway and I couldn't park it anymore because it was, it'd be a difficult situation. So
This plan is essentially our proposal based on best practice and standards. So
yeah,
if we need to make adjustments to that, we'll see if we're capable of doing that. And
Thanks.
we'll find out during that investigation process with folks if that's something we need to look into. Can we go to the next one, Catherine? So here's one of those curb extension / bump outs. So this one's at 38th. We're going to bump out those corners. It does a couple things when we bump out a corner at an intersection. Number one is it narrows the street a little bit, and so it shortens the crossing distance for people who are trying to get across the street. The second thing is that if there is no one parked on the street at the time, it also makes the edges a little bit narrower, and it tends to slow people down. So it's sort of a form of passive traffic calming. It also allows our designers to get the ADA grades a little bit better because it gives them more room to be able to drop the sidewalk down, and more room once you get to the top of the ramp to get it back straight so that it matches up with the rest of the sidewalk. So these give us a lot of benefits, and it's a standard feature in the city of Eugene to do these curb extensions whenever we're doing a roadway project or a sidewalk project. And this is an example of that at 38th.
at the 38th intersection, sorry, Linda, you had the sidewalk adjacent to the curb though, didn't you? Because it's already there.
It's the existing, so it looks like it's set back.
Oh, it goes from, I can't see on Google Maps. It is set back.
Yeah,
Alright,
that
so-
sidewalk it has got a little green space between the sidewalk and the road right now
Okay,
on Hilyard.
gotcha. Okay, sorry.
Linda?
I was just gonna say that a friend of mine lives on right by a bump out. At first, when they put it in, they didn't put any paint on it.
Yeah.
So it was not marked yellow. And another friend actually hit it when she was going on the street. And the city, kind of apologized, and then they came in, they painted it. But I think it's important that it's not too far of a bump out and that it's also marked really
Yeah,
well.
that's standard practice now. We've learned from those lessons. I also think that folks need to pay attention when they drive. And so it's always interesting to us when people hit these things because we leave between 22 and 24 feet between those curb extensions. And a car is about 6 feet wide. So generally speaking, we should be able to.
Well, it was
avoid
at
them.
nighttime and it was not marked at all. And the city apologized because it was not marked.
Yeah,
So-
nighttime matters too. So the other thing that we'll do because of instances like those is we'll put little reflectors on top of them too.
That's what it
that-
needs. Yeah.
As you shine your headlights at it, you'll be able to see that there's something in the road there. Dennis?
Could I ask a question now?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess it's a question and a comment also, in that if you were walking on 38th and you walk straight across the street, there's a like an ADA curb cut on the, let's say Tugman side, but it's
Yeah, it's
actually
on the
more
west
into
side.
the property there.
Yeah.
Well, whenever it rains, there's always 2 to 3 feet of water in front of that.
Yep.
Is there some way to correct that when you redo the street, and some way on these 2 curb cuts to make sure that there's not a foot or 2 of water in front of them?
Yeah, so Catherine and I went over the plan set earlier today, and I noticed that over on the west side, it looks like we have a stormwater planter just north of that ramp. But I wasn't sure that it was a stormwater planter, and I wasn't able to contact the project manager in time to confirm that, but it looks like we're building something there so that the water isn't going directly to the low spot, but it's going to hit something before it gets there and potentially drain into that vegetated stormwater planter. So yes, we're aware of the flooding. I know folks who live down there too, and they just said this thing's always full of water. And if you go to Google Street View, it indeed has water in it. So yeah, we're aware of that, and hopefully we're fixing it.
Yeah, and just as a side note, up on the south end of Tugman, they got that little city property that cuts across, like a lot that cuts across from 39th to Donald. They just put it in about a year or 2 ago. Same situation. You always got a couple of feet of water whenever it rains in front of it, and they just put it in. So I don't know if I need to report that somewhere or just to tell you that you could put a tickler on it. I don't know.
Yeah, if we just built it, generally these things are under warranty for a while, and it could be that we designed it incorrectly, and so that water is pooling. Otherwise, we keep an eye on it so that if the contractor didn't build it to our spec, that they have to rebuild it. Could be that it was just designed incorrectly, or we were predicting that when we move the pavement, that the water will flow differently. And so in the meantime, it could be pooling water. And then when we rebuild the road surface, that we will drain either in a different direction, or we will add stormwater features to the road at that time. But yeah, I think you should always report that. You can call 682-4800 anytime you see plants overgrown, a stop sign down, signals that aren't working right, flooding, all of that stuff. That goes directly to our maintenance department, and it gets reported to basically our maintenance team's project managers, and then they farm those individual requests for service out into staff's what we call buckets. So that's the best way to do it.
That's good information.
Mhm.
Catherine, can we go to the north side of that intersection?
We sure can.
We
How about
turn
number
direction
2?
again on you. Yeah, so Hilyard is at the top here and 38th is on the left. Our engineers don't have any respect for, cardinal directions. So we always have to, so anyway, we turned it a little bit on you, but so we're bumping out the northern corner too. And so it'll make the throat of 38th Avenue a little bit narrower. And what that tends to do is, so folks in cars who are going around won't be able to speed through that corner as people are crossing across 38th. We will, of course, paint yellow curb on it, get some reflective markers out there so that folks know that this change has happened. And it looks like we do not have a crossing of Hilyard Street in this design. It's on that south side of 38th to match up with the ramp that's on the west side of Hilyard.
Sorry, say that again. You do have a crossing down at 38th on the south side?
So if you
Crosswalk?
look at, so this design shows that our ramp from the sidewalk will come down, and so you can cross 38th to another ramp.
Yeah.
But you can't cross, we do not have another ramp that goes across Hilyard on the north side of the intersection. We only have that on the south side. And that's because it matches up with an existing ramp that's over on the west side already.
I see.
So sometimes on an intersection, we'll do that based on what's existing.
Yeah. And
Oh,
when you
and-
say
and
crossing, sorry, go ahead.
The note here is to protect the existing fence. The property owner here has a fence up and we're building outside of that fence.
When you say crossing, do you mean like full crosswalk?
So there's a difference. So statutorily, there's a crossing at every corner, but we don't mark every one of those crossings. So we're not talking about adding paint to formalize the crosswalk here, but there is a crosswalk. There's a crossing here. It is not a marked crosswalk.
I would highly encourage a actual crosswalk at 37th, because that's where everybody cuts over from the bridge.
So we'll get to 37th. I think what's, and we've mentioned Chris Henry already. The condition that we would prefer for us to mark a marked crosswalk is to have the street traffic calmed. And as I mentioned, that project is a year or two out. So once the street itself is traffic calmed, then we will put the striping in. If we put striping in now, the striping will come up with the pavement in a year or two. And so we're not going to do that now. But we'll show how we're bumping that out. So the crossing distance will be decreased.
When it is repaved, it will be done.
The crosswalk will be installed when the pavement project occurs, yes.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
I think you were saying, and I'm sorry, is it Reed? You were saying that the crosswalk would be painted once the street is calmed. Does that mean the installation of the sort of mounds, calming zones sort of thing?
Yeah, that is planned for the pavement project of Hilyard.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that generally a policy where sidewalk or crosswalks can be painted or will be painted when the street is calmed, or the inverse, there is not or cannot be a crosswalk if the street is not calmed? Is that the policy?
We have a matrix that we look at. It's based on how much traffic is there, how fast the traffic is moving, if there's any curvature of the road, how many people are currently crossing, what the destinations are on both sides, if there's overhead lighting or not. Based on all of those conditions, we decide whether or not to paint a crosswalk. And in this particular instance, our traffic engineer would prefer that we paint it once we've traffic calmed or slowed the speed down on Hilyard Street. So that's the order, is let's traffic calm the street, make it a safer environment for people to cross, and then add the formalized crossing.
Okay, that makes, yeah, I'd be interested to see that matrix at some point if possible.
We use the FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration. We use the standard pedestrian crosswalk countermeasure table. We have that actually in if you go to the city's website and type in complete streets, you'll see our entire complete streets manual is in there. And in the crosswalks section, that table is there.
Okay, I'll probably follow up just to make sure I find the right thing. And yeah, my question is less about this specific intersection and more just that is new information to me. So I'm just looking to understand it.
Yeah, generally on crosswalks, the answer is it depends. And there's a whole lot of factors that go into when we paint and do not paint a crosswalk. And it's an engineering decision. And so, Linda, go ahead.
So somewhere along the intersection, any of the intersections by Tugman, will there be any kind of painted crosswalk, but also with the flashing lights, like using solar to flash lights that people could use to walk across?
So we start with the intervention that we think will work, and then we move up the scale. So by the time we get to flashing lights, there's a condition there that isn't being satisfied by the existing environment. So we think once we traffic calm the street, that a standard crosswalk will probably work up at 37th, for example, and that we won't need the flashing lights. The next step would be if folks still aren't yielding, we're not getting good yielding behavior at the crosswalk, that next step would be adding the flashing lights. So we iterate as we look at these things. And we do have examples where we've gone back to crosswalks that we thought were sufficient and retrofitted them for more interventions like those flashing lights.
Right, but we have lots of kids that use that park and go across the street. And I'm sort of concerned that we wait till something's happened or not working before we are proactive and have a crosswalk there. I mean, to me, it's a logical place by the park for people to be able to cross the street safely,
Yeah.
especially kids is my concern.
Yeah, I understand that completely. And that's why we're bumping out the corners to decrease the crossing distance. And we're matching that up where there's existing overhead lighting. And if you match that with paint as well as signs and advanced stop bars, that's generally enough to get the good yielding behavior that we're looking at. And that's where we start when we're looking at marking crosswalks. So this will be another example of that. But what the bump outs will do, the curbs moving together, is it'll give people an opportunity to walk out past parked cars and see if there's traffic coming, versus right now, they sort of have to peek out and then sort of decide if it's safe. So as we bump that in, we're giving people an opportunity to get closer without actually stepping out into.
Yeah, I understand that, but even stop signs don't keep people from going through stop signs. But I do think blinking lights do alert people more than just paint on the road or the bump outs. I mean, I think the flashing stop signs, I think the flashing crosswalks do get people's attention even more so for safety reasons.
Yeah, I understand that. One of our giant limitations is the cost of those flashing lights, which is about $100,000. And so that's why we have to sort of do this step by step. We don't have enough money to do everything at once. And so we try an intervention we think will work. And if it doesn't, we move on to the next thing. Lucy?
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate and strengthen on what Linda says. I mean, I'm understanding that some of these traffic calmings are 2 years out.
Yeah.
What can we do now? I mean, I would think the cost of just painting stripes across the road, regardless of any other calming techniques, would save lives potentially right now. I don't think it is fair to ask the citizens along Hilyard or who cross Hilyard to wait 2 years or more for that to come about. So I'm going to put my plug in for let's do something minimal now, because Linda and I have stood, at a meeting site along there and watched people whiz by and kids trying to cross the street there. And it's very dangerous for the citizens and their children. So I'm going to put a plug in for the kids and ask that the city consider that as a hotspot and doing something minimal now.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will say that we have a list citywide of everywhere where people would like those enhanced crossings. And so we are investing here with a treatment we think will work. As you can imagine, $100,000 a pop, we can only do so many things on that list. But we definitely have our eye on Tugman Park, and we have to take a graduated approach because we can't just put stuff everywhere all of the time. We have to use a methodology that allows us to spread our resources more effectively. So we follow a graduated approach, and this is, if Chris Henry comes back, it would be interesting to talk to him about crosswalks too, because as I mentioned, a lot of things are up to engineering discretion or judgment, and they have a lot of authority on when things go and don't go and why. But it's in a crosswalk alone, it doesn't necessarily make it a safer space. Unfortunately, there's a lot of studies that bear that out, and the road condition itself has to feel like a realistic speed. And generally what we think on this street is we're going to have to treat the street differently in order to reach that speed. So that's the order that we're going to go in.
Part of the issue is the E-Web, all the trucks that have been going up and down, and there's a hill. So if you're coming from the south down the hill, people speed. So I understand, the calming is going to be great and it's going to help, but right now with the building up at the top of the hill, we have trucks involved too, big trucks, and a lot of them. Now I have noticed it slowed down a bit. Dennis probably would know more because that's his hood, but for a while there it was nonstop trucks up to that e-website.
You know who the project manager is for eWeb? Do you guys have a contact? I mean, I would let them know that the trucks are speeding. I mean,
You
that's
do.
something.
Yeah, yeah. And that really is, if that's the concern, that really is a project specific concern. I can't wait until the street calming's on. I mean, I'm with Linda and Lucy in that 37th crossing where everybody is riding their bikes down 37th and walking across from the bridge. It's taking your life in your hands, crossing that street. It really is. I wouldn't let my kids do it by themselves. So we need to move on so we have time for other things, but it looks like the sidewalk jogs. Is that because of the utility pole? It doesn't go straight?
It looks like we have a fire hydrant in there.
Yeah, there's a fire hydrant there and a pole, both.
E-web pole. Yep, there's an E-web pole. I see the marking for that.
Yeah.
And a fire hydrant. So we're trying to avoid both of them. And then it curves because we have that curb extension. Catherine, if you go to the next slide. Jessica, should we move on or are we just out of time for this topic?
No, I think this is really important and
Okay.
I'm really glad you're here. I have one concern about, I appreciate the bump outs and I know that's sort of standard practice at this point. When you do, people who are going to be turning right, so around a bump out into Hilyard, my experience with the bump outs on East and West Amazon and in my neighborhood are that it sort of juts you out farther into the oncoming lane of traffic. And seeing as how there's not a whole lot of leeway there on Hilyard and cars are going very fast, that bump out, if you're turning right, I've seen actually on, it was West Amazon, a kind of a collision for that reason. And it's problematic. So I know I'm not presuming that those bump outs can be changed, but I do want to bring that up, that turning out around a bump out into a busy road is, especially for a bigger vehicle, like if you're driving a truck or a trailer, is extremely concerning.
Yeah, so a lot of our streets were designed in the 50s and 60s based on the highway capacity manual, and they are as wide as they are because we said, let's make everything wider. The result of that is 40,000 deaths a year because people are driving too fast. And so what we're trying to do with our Complete Streets initiative and our Vision Zero efforts is to narrow things up so that our most vulnerable users, people on sidewalks, people on bikes, have protected spaces to be, and people in cars have to slow down. If you go around one of those curb extensions at 15 miles an hour, it works fine. If you try to get off of, and I model good behavior, so one of the other things I always talk to neighborhoods about is pace car programs. And pace car means you drive the speed limit. So if it's a 20-mile-an-hour street, drive 20 miles an hour so that you're modeling good behavior. And I know it's a big change, but it's something we're going to have to get to if we want to reduce the overall number of crashes and the severity of injuries that occur as a result of traffic violence. So this is the new engineering practice, and people are going to have to adjust to some of these changes. And I know that that's been uncomfortable for folks. But we're trying to save lives. We're trying to make it easier for people to get to where they want to go without injury.
I just want to say it's not about the speed that I'm going because I'm completely stopped going slowly.
It's the angle.
It's the angle. Yeah.
I can drive one with you and we can test it. But we do auto turn on all of these, and they do tend to work, at least according to our program and when I drive them. So yeah, I think it takes change. I think it's just going to be a little different for a while till it's more consistent.
Just take the feedback. That's all.
Okay, got it. I know. Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about that because the bump outs really started happening about 2 or 3 years ago. So we've had a lot of discussions about them, and we've tested a lot of them to see if there was a problem. This one too, one of those yellow notes says protect existing fence. We're going to do that on both sides of this driveway. There is a new driveway apron as well, and a tree that will be protected as part of the construction project. So this block is pretty straightforward. Go to the next one, Catherine. So here's one where there's a small bush where we say we're going to have to remove that bush. And then there's a tree that ends up very close to where the sidewalk is going to be placed. Based on comments I heard this earlier today, I'd say that maybe we could avoid that entirely if we move that sidewalk a little bit closer to the street. That could be a potential answer. And we can talk about that as when I talk to the project engineer about this. But we tried to avoid the trees here. When trees come close to the sidewalk, we'll have the city forester come out and make sure that we're not doing any harm to those trees. Next one, Catherine. So north is up here. This is at 37th. So this is the north side of 37th where we are bumping out that entire curb ramp. And so again, shortening up the crossing distance for folks who are trying to cross Hilyard. When the pavement project comes through, we will also have a curb extension over on the west side that will go in at that time. We weren't able to do it as part of this project because of the type of grant money that we're using. We're using federal money here, and so we can't go outside of the project corridor. But we're extending the curb into both 37th and into Hilyard with this design. Next one, Catherine. So here's another view of that and some big trees that exist just to the north of 37th. We are avoiding all of those by shifting the sidewalk a little bit outside of the root zone. And also there's it says protect power pole. So there's also going to be an E-web pole there. And so we can avoid the trees and the E-web pole by simply shifting the sidewalk a little bit to the east. So that's the plan there. Next one, Catherine. And then we just run that straight to 36th place where we'll add a curb ramp. I think the next one is going to be a little different. This is by the Sikh temple where they have two driveways. So we'll re-pour those driveways and run the sidewalk a little bit east of where the planter strip would be adjacent to the curb. And then that will align well with the existing sidewalk just to the north of their property, which is also set back, and there are also street trees at that point. So if folks wanted to come in and put street trees and make that consistent down Hilyard, there's going to be space to be able to do that within that setback area. And I think that's all of our drawings. Catherine, do we have any? I think that's all the drawings.
Yep, that's all the drawings. So, well, Reed, you already kind of spoke to the timeline.
Yeah, this timeline is we'll find out together because we haven't bid this yet, and so the contractor hasn't had time to digest it and then create a timetable. But as soon as I have that, I will let you know.
And then our very last slide, we've kind of been asking questions throughout, but here's my contact information, which Jess, you already have. So you can get it all from Jess, or you can take a photo of this screen or just write it down. But you're welcome to email or call me with questions.
I just want to clarify, there's only parking on the west side by Tugman Park, right? There's no parking allowed on the other side? Is that correct?
I think there's parking on both sides.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. It's only parking there's only parking restrictions where we sign it. There aren't any signs. So there wouldn't be parking prohibitions.
Okay, well, I don't think it's necessarily going to affect this project, but you know, some of us have real concerns about middle housing not requiring parking on the site. And our streets up here in this neighborhood, some of them are extremely narrow. So they didn't get in on that widening of in the 50s and 60s, but or whatever. We have extremely narrow streets. And when there's more cars parked, even more than there are now, there are going to be issues. And that's why I'm just asking, that's a wide enough street, Hilyard, that I think it probably won't be affected there, and there may not be any building in that area either. But, just for general knowledge for both of you to know that that is going to be an issue in some areas of the city, particularly I know in our area because of the narrow streets, and there's already cars parking on the street. So.
And I think related to parking, especially in that location adjacent to Tugman, is there's a lot of use that happens at Tugman Park. And so the parking there can fill up.
Yep.
When I talked to Parks and Open Space staff about it, they'd like to have more parking available right there. Obviously, that'd be hard to provide without digging into the park and taking away some of the green space.
Right.
Which they don't want to do. So the parking is completely contingent upon on-street. And so as far as I know, into the future, we're not planning on taking away any parking, save for a curb extension or two to meet one of those crosswalks. And those should exist anyway, because you shouldn't be able to park in front of a curb ramp. And so there should be parking restrictions there. We'll bring those out, but the rest of the available curb space should be available for parking.
And those are ADA so that wheelchairs and walkers can go down those, right?
Absolutely, yes.
I think it's really exciting, all these sidewalk plans. We've been looking at sidewalks in our transportation committee for a couple years now, and we are a huge proponent of sidewalks, and we do our sidewalk vegetation cleanup twice a year now, and help neighbors to clear their sidewalks. And we think that these sidewalks are going to be key transportation corridors in the neighborhood. And we thank you for all the hard work that's gone in.
Yeah.
It is there's a lot of work in these plans, and we really appreciate that. And I guess my main concern, of course, is how it's worded when presenting to the neighbors who actually live there. And in terms of, negotiating space from curb and from their front door and so forth, that it's amenable to all, and that it's made a positive for everybody in the neighborhood.
What I would plan to do is to go out there, Catherine, to go out there with the design engineer. And if there are some changes that the property owner would like to see made, Brian, who's the design engineer, who has really struggled with the drawing, will be able to say why he put it where he put it, and he will know if he can move it or not. He's the best person to have out there, but it's not uncommon for us to make those adjustments on a property by property basis, as long as we keep in mind that each property, we're trying to keep the sidewalk as straight as we can, so that each property doesn't go like the sidewalk doesn't move a lot. But it can, it can move a little bit based on what's there. And I think that that's reasonable.
Anybody else? I wanted to wrap this up just so we could touch on speeding, but any final comments on the Tugman plan?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go sidewalks. We want to encourage any sidewalk implementation we can. We think it's awesome.
Hey, talk to your city councilor too, because the reason we don't have a sidewalk infill program is because city council can't really agree as to how we would implement it. So I think they need to hear that this is a priority for neighborhoods, and that staff should get working on something that they can agree to, because at this point we're idle. We're not looking at a program.
Well, I know I personally have talked to our counselor about the fact that other cities have at least a percentage agreement on sidewalks, and it's not totally put upon the property owner to spend thousands of dollars sometimes to put in sidewalks. So at least he's aware of it, but getting a vote on council is a totally different issue. But I think that's the fact that the other cities have been able to work this out. I think we can too.
So let's spend, do you guys have another 10 minutes or 15 minutes to spend, or do you need to jet since it's 8 o'clock?
I'm good.
Is that okay?
Totally.
And if anybody needs to bottom out, that's totally fine. I wanted to get in this. This is important to a lot of neighbors. It's the number one talked about complaint that our committee gets is speeding. And obviously it's not just a road design issue. It's also, we've been working with traffic enforcement this spring to have, traffic enforcement down here more often, and the road radars set up, which are working beautifully tonight on 43rd. And so we realize it's not just a, design issue, but in some cases, you know, there's some definite design issues. Leo came to our last neighbors meeting, concerned specifically about one of the notorious stretches in this region of town, which is 33rd, right? You're on 33rd?
Yeah. Between.
Yes. And you had noticed that is a particular problem on that road because it's a through way from Willamette to Hilyard.
Post office.
I guess, I mean,
Yeah.
I would rather not presume to know why people are driving the way they are. To your point, yes, could be design, could be enforcement, could be, I don't know, maybe there's a secret drag racing society. I don't know. I found it interesting to hear the discussion about calming zones and crosswalks, because installing a crosswalk is something that had not occurred to me, right? But we have traffic calming zones. I believe.
Yes, you do.
They do, in my opinion, that those are ineffective
Yep.
in that situation. For, again, why? I don't know. All I know is that they're ineffective. So Reed and Catherine, I think, again, I'm new to the meeting, new to the this group, so I gather you're from the city. Maybe you didn't hear me what I described at the last neighborhood meeting, but we live on 33rd currently. We're renting, but we are moving into a permanent place on Ferry, just a couple blocks away. So we're here for the long term. Have a baby who's going to grow up and run around, and so like this is a concerning issue, especially as kids grow up. But even right now, pulling out of our driveway is kind of a hazard. Pulling into our driveway is a hazard because as I slow down to pull into the driveway, I've been passed both on the right and the left. So I don't need to tell you which side of the street I live on, because you can figure out in either way, it's either going to be a collision or someone on the sidewalk is going to get hit by someone who can't bother to wait for me to slow down and pull into the driveway. So that's just that's my anecdote. I prefer to advocate for things and make decisions based on data and a more structured approach than just one person's lived experience. But that is, so I'm excited to figure out what kind of information I need to gather to solve the problem for myself and for others as well.
And let's go to Lucy, because she's been collecting a lot of this information from neighbors.
So Leo, I have a question for you. Why don't you think that the current traffic calming engineered things, why aren't they working? Because we describe what you've got. I mean, I drive that several times a week.
I've got
But
some
describe it.
history. I've got some history that I could talk about 33rd because it's come up before.
Okay,
So let me talk about what traffic calming
Reed,
is.
can I just really briefly, I'll
Yeah.
be very brief and answer that question. I believe that they're easy for someone who's in a hurry to drive around.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's two theories in traffic calming. One of them is called horizontal deflection, where we make folks do this, and folks figure out sooner or later that they don't really have to do that. If they move over a little bit, they can just go straight. And then the other one is vertical deflection. Those are the humps where it feels like something's going to happen to your car. It takes the fear of damage for folks to comply. We don't do horizontal deflection anymore, like what is on 33rd. So that's one of the problems there.
Ah.
The other problem is that the devices that were spec'd for, there's like these little humps, these little yellow round things, which at the time were called turtle shells.
Mhm.
Were supposed to look like turtle shells. Like if you drove over them, it was going to bump, and they did not end up being what we thought they were going to be. And so that design doesn't work because of, I think, the horizontal deflection, and because the thing that was supposed to entice folks into this serpentine pattern is ineffective. And so it would be interesting if you meet with Chris Henry again, because he was the design engineer on this one and learned a lot from that project, which is why we don't do streets like that anymore. He's got a lot of history on it. It would be interesting to talk about, well, what if it doesn't work? Do we go back and retrofit that with something else? I think this experiment has been going on I've been here for 10 years and it was in there before that. So I don't know how long we've been living with it in this condition, but it might be time for us to look at it again and do something that's more effective, my opinion.
Yeah, I would love to do that. So you said Chris Henry, who's that?
Correct. He's
Who's
the
Chris
traffic
Henry?
engineer.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I would just, following on to what you just said, the serpentine pattern, I've observed on our street, both people just moving to the side and driving straight. Those are the more clever people. And then actually, maybe these people are the more clever people, the ones who do the serpentine pattern, but it doesn't slow them down at all. In fact, they probably pick up more orbital momentum that way. So, you know, I sounds like we're in agreement that the horizontal
working.
approach doesn't work. I would love to have my original idea was, well, let's have a speed bump, right? I moved from Boston and there was a street right across from, well, it doesn't matter, but there was a totally residential street, and someone, I believe, went over to Home Depot, bought some kind of device, nailed it into the street, and we called it the citizen bump. So anyhow, I thought of speed bump at first. It just seems obvious, right? And I suppose that's what you're calling the vertical intervention. But crosswalk, right? Stop sign at all those intersections. I mean, people are basically treating it like a speedway. And so just like on Hilyard, people need a reason to slow down. Yeah, that's it. But the speed bump feels like a very kind of more residential character, which is.
So stop signs aren't good for speed reduction because folks feel inconvenienced and don't comply with the stop sign. And then once they start accelerating again, they will tend to go faster than they would have if they weren't stopped to begin with. And so we tend not to use that for traffic calming. And the same thing for crosswalks. I don't think we want to put people in spaces where we don't feel comfortable driving.
Okay, so I'm hearing a lot of, but I'm hearing you're really agreed that my initial thought is the one that is backed up by best practice, which is vertical. What did you call it? Vertical bumping?
Yeah, but don't buy things from Home Depot to do that because we'll find out about it and we'll take them.
Wasn't planning on it, but I admired the initiative.
Mhm.
Thank you. I want to go to an issue that we had talked with you about 2 years ago. Is everybody comfortable with moving on from 33rd?
Can I just ask, I'm curious what the next step should be for that one. We reach out to Chris Henry.
Well, fortunately, Catherine is on the call and she works with Logan from our team, and they compile a list of traffic calming projects or streets that would potentially qualify for traffic calming, because traffic calming is already on 33rd. You've already qualified. And so I would say, Catherine, let's have a conversation with Logan about 33rd, because we should probably get another speed study and verify what's going on there.
Yep.
And I just want to say, like, if they kind of know that something that they did isn't working, but that was 15 years ago, why hasn't anybody else looked at these things without us begging somebody to look at it if they know it's not working?
Because the list is very, 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 very long. And so there are neighborhoods that don't have any traffic calming at all. And SEN actually has lots of streets with traffic calming. And so we're trying to spread those projects around as much as we can. But like I said, at what point do we come back to those projects? It might be time to come back.
Well, and just to bring Leo up to speed, we may have talked about this before, but Jess and I put together a pretty lengthy letter and list and did send it to the city. And of the, and it doesn't include everything in the Southeast neighbors, but we had a list that we sent on of the hotspots. I mean, Hilyard was one of them. I mean, I can list them all, Dillard, 43rd, and
Fox Hollow,
Fox Hollow. Oh yeah, Fox Hollow. Don't get me started on Fox Hollow.
Willamette.
Yeah. So I mean, we had what, 10 and 12 hotspots that in specific, not just the whole street, but between 38th and the post office or whatever, where people are obviously speeding and not paying attention to any of the existing signs, even the school flashing signs. The school behind the post office, uphill of the post office, is really dangerous. So I mean, we've been letting the folks at the city know that, you know, we are really concerned about this. And so anyway, just to let you know, Leo, this is not a new issue for us and the city.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to something that we had, neighbors are really concerned about. We talked with you about 2 years ago because it's within the school area up on Fox Hollow and 46th.
46.
But really all of Fox Hollow is a downhill speedway. And you've got schools there, and we've discussed this in the past, but obviously nothing has transpired in the last 2 years due to a bunch of reasons. But we're wondering how we can move forward with you guys on some kind of progress with speed on Fox Hollow, particularly around the school zones.
Fox Hollow and Willamette and Dillard and Donald. I mean, those are all examples of streets that do this. And it's difficult for us to put bumps on those streets because of the way that drainage works and the way that we can construct things. And so we haven't had a real good answer for what to do on hilly streets to calm traffic. And we've had a lot of conversations around it and not a lot of agreement. And Catherine, you're taking a note right now, which is good because we should talk to the design engineers again about that. Because what I'm hearing is that we still have need there. We have done no treatment and something needs to be done. So let's come up with something and at least try it and see if it's effective. We've just not done that because we can't come up with a design that we agree with.
Yeah, we brought it up. Oh, sorry, Linda. We brought it up with Sarah Mazie, the safe routes to school. I mean, there's 4 or 5 schools right there that, I mean, it's a real concern with kids. Go ahead, Linda.
I was just gonna say, you know, that definitely is a major concern. The other for me has been Fox Hollow down on the bottom of the hill at the stop signs at West Amazon and East Amazon, 4-way stops that people go through all the time. I have not, that we were told that maybe they'd put a video camera up, which I don't believe has ever happened.
It has happened. I remember talking about it. So we do have some footage, at least of one of those sides, either west or east was recorded.
Okay, but you know, maybe people weren't going through them during that time, but you know, Jess and Rachel came upon an accident that was at that corner. So we know that it does happen, that there are accidents. And, you know, I had suggested flashing stop signs because I do think that they help. And Matt Keating did a ride along with one of the officers in the neighborhood, and they went by a flashing stop sign. And Matt, and I don't know where it was, but and Matt was told by the officer that yes, they have decreased people going through stop signs. So the police believe that. So, you know, I know that there's a cost, they're solar, you know, they're not costing energy once they get going, but I know they have to be, you know, maintained or whatever once in a while. But, you know, what does it take? You know, people getting in accidents, people getting killed. I mean, it's like, it's obvious that that's a bad place there when people come to, especially when they come down off of Fox Hollow onto West Amazon. I don't know that there's as much problem, you know, coming across the other way, but
camera findings is what I would ask.
What's that, Jess?
What were the camera findings there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to know that too. And we have a coordination meeting with traffic operations every 2 weeks. And I'd like to know what the results of that are. So we'll put that on the next agenda and figure out if there's a report that exists and then be able to send that on to you. Because I don't know what they've done with those data.
Okay.
And then the flashing stop sign, we have one in the community and it was installed not too long ago, maybe 1.5 years or 2 years ago. It's at First and Bertelson. You guys were all the way over there. And so we might just be getting data back about its effectiveness, but if EPD supports it, could be that our traffic staff supports those too, and that could be a solution. Again, I don't decide that. Chris Henry's the decider. when
Right,
it comes to that
right.
stuff. So we'll talk to him about that and the
Yeah.
effectiveness.
Well,
of
I
them.
will say a couple kudos that they have in our neighborhood, different places put up the sign saying your speed, which we're really appreciative of because we have asked for that. And also there have been officers, because there's been a couple citations made in our neighborhood that we've seen. So we are appreciative that some of our comments are being
Mhm.
attended to, but it has been 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, the temporary fixes like that are great, but we are pushing for something more permanent.
I want to ask a question. This may be a public works question. I heard that not all of the new speed limit signs had been put up yet because of staffing issues. Do you know anything about that?
The 20-mile-per-hour speed limits.
20, and others, I always drive around, thinking that the speed limit signs are sort of absent, and that might be a real reason why people are speeding, because they honestly didn't see a speed limit sign very often.
Well, it used to be that local streets were all statutorily 25. And when the state legislation went through that we could change them to 20, we did that, but we had to mark them. And so that process did take a long time for us to go out and mark the 20s. I know that we thought we were done at one point and then we went out and did it again. I haven't heard recently that we've not completed that. It's interesting though, because they're not on every block. Like my block, I can't even think of where one is. I think it's way back at 24th. Generally off of a higher class street, like a collector street, there will be a 20-mile-per-hour to a local, like at that point, which is like once you drive into the neighborhood local street network or grid, there will be a 20-mile-per-hour sign, but probably not for the rest of that corridor. So there may still be too few. And where you have destinations like parks and schools and things like that, that might be an instance where we want to have more of them. Again, this is new to us. We just got the authorization to put them up and started putting them up. And I think they're all out there, but they might not be. And maybe we have to put some more out.
Well, I'm confused because, as we said, the mobile signs that say the speed limit is 25 and your speed is, 27 or whatever. On our street in my neighborhood, which is 43rd coming uphill from Dillard, the flashing signs are out there this week, which is great, but it says 25. It says the speed limit on this road is 25.
So I think 43rd is a higher classification. I think it's a
higher
collector, not a local.
Got it.
Nobody
Okay.
does 25 on that road.
That's
So what those cameras can do too is they can record speed. Are these the EPD trailers, that little white trailer with the signs?
Yeah.
Maybe we can get permanent signs there too that can record better data, because we have trouble getting.
That'd be
data
great.
Signs. Yeah.
Well, I had a question, but Dennis has had his
Dennis
hand
had
up.
his hand
Yes.
up.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask, is there a map that we can go to that shows the 20-mile-per-hour streets? Because yes, there's lots of
Good
residential
question.
streets that still have 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs.
Yeah. Not that I'm aware of. I've asked for it too. I think it exists in a GIS layer, but not available to the public, but it should be. And I will ask that question again.
Great, thank you so much.
Hey, Jess, did you ever get that solved up by the school where your kids go, where it says
and
end of school zone 30 miles an hour?
Right. No, it doesn't. It's the school zone speed is 20 miles an hour, obviously, but which is the same as the neighborhood speed now. I mean, it's probably a public works issue, but where you have in a neighborhood, it says end school zone, parents just ram it to speed up. Oh, okay, I guess I can go faster. The signage is very confusing. And particularly we've heard lots of complaints in the Charlemagne sort of north to 30th whole corridor. That neighborhood gets a ton of talk everywhere about speeders through all there because of the school, because there's so many schools down here, parents coming off of 30th, it's a mess. And then there's the whole school zone issue. There's not a lot of sidewalks on a lot of those roads, a lot of near misses with kids, but lots of people speeding, and that is a notorious complaint area. And I can attest to the speed, not
Yeah.
just parents, but neighbors also speeding through there.
Yeah.
On the north-south particularly.
Yeah, Potter and east from Potter's bad by Charlemagne, and then east of Potter, all the Kincaid and east and west of Potter,
Yeah.
because people cut through that neighborhood.
Kincaid's where it says end speed zone. Oh, okay, I don't have to do 20 anymore.
In school.
I particularly think that neighborhood should be peppered with 20-mile-an-hour signs because it doesn't have any, honestly. And it's almost forgivable for people not to know the speed limit, that they're, if they're not going, if they don't know it, how, someone doesn't know the speed limit. It's not marked. So we need to do our job and make sure it's marked. And then we can, ask the police to hold people accountable or do, look at other options, but maybe people just don't know because there honestly isn't a lot of marking.
So our understanding of the state laws for school speed zones is anytime we establish a school speed zone, we have to tell folks when it's over. And that is out of context if it's a 20-mile-per-hour school speed zone and then it turns into a 20-mile-per-hour street. So
there should be a 20-mile-an-hour sign
problem.
right after it then, because people just take off. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Oh, okay. School zones.
Sorry, what is the point of a school speed zone if it's the same speed as the speed limit?
So this
Couldn't we
just
solve
happened.
this
It
whole
just
thing by
happened.
removing the
Yeah,
speed
so-
zone? and
So
then
yes, we
applying
haven't
the speed limit?
reconciled. We haven't reconciled that yet. Yeah, that's out of bounds.
That's new. But on West Amazon, after the schools, it does have a end of school zone, then it has a 30. So it is marked. I mean, so it does seem like it should be marked other places if it's going to continue as a 20, not just have nothing,
And down East Amazon is a nightmare because you have a school zone, then it goes up to 30 and then you've got another school zone.
Yep.
50 feet later. Very confusing. That intersection down at Dillard and East Amazon has become a real problem during real hazard during school Ridgeline school times because of parents parking over on Dillard. We may, you may want to look at something in terms of marking that crosswalk better. That's extremely dangerous. I've almost seen kids hit there just this week with people speeding northbound on East Amazon, people parking on Dillard. There's no sidewalk on the one side. It's a real problem. And you wouldn't know it if you come in the middle of the day to look at. Where the issues you're going to see are at the drop off and pickup times for school, unfortunately. Or those are the busy times. But it's a real hazard. Just to put that on your radar, maybe painting the curb so that people can't park over there and walk across. I don't know what you want to do, but it's very dangerous.
we have a lot of schools.
We do.
We do.
So what I'm hearing, Reed, you say is we get in touch with Chris.
Yeah, and just have him come to one of these meetings and pepper him with some of these questions too. And he'll tell you the why. And just be prepared for, it's usually an engineering answer. And which means that it's backed by some data. And that's generally how we support our decision making, but it could be out of balance. Like the 20-mile-per-hour speed zone on a 20-mile-per-hour street makes no sense, but we haven't reconciled that yet because it sort of just happened. Those things are good to talk about though, because it means we should change that. And that could actually be a call 682-4800 and give them the location and say you should add a 20-mile-per-hour, like right after this sign so that folks know what it is. Sounds like we could just have a sign person go out and bolt that in, but intersection stuff is where Chris is a decider and a major factor as to what happens there and his team. And so, yeah, he'll tell you why or what it would take to change it. And so often we need to do an engineering study. And so staffing for us has been an issue for a long time. I know folks get tired of hearing that, but it's the reality. But we need to know that those problems exist. And so I think it would be good for him to, if he's available, to be able to attend one of these and be able to talk about what crosswalks mean, what stop signs mean, what interventions we can do if things aren't working, how traffic calming works, that sort of thing, how that's determined. All of that is stuff that he would be able to answer, probably better than me.
I would just like to add that, and Reed, this is not directed at you, but rather at the group as we prepare for a meeting with Chris, that engineers and engineering do not have a monopoly on data. It is not the case that engineering decisions are made with data and non-engineering decisions are made without data. So what I'm hearing is that Chris Henry will have data that informs the choices that he will make or recommend. But that does not mean that a reasonable and rational argument could not be made for a different case with a different set of data. So if that's the case, if we don't have data to support what we would like to do, then there's really nothing that will happen that we want, right? But if we have some data that supports what we need to do or what we see as a need, and Chris Henry has a whole other set of concerns that are engineering focused, well, then that's the conversation that we can have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a lot of, so there's the data route, and then there's engineering judgment. And in most engineers rely on the data and the manuals to tell them what to do, but there are situations that don't fit nicely into boxes where they're going to have to use their discretion. And so it's nice to hear from folks about what the problems are and how just checking the boxes doesn't mean that something's fixed.
Doesn't it also rely on funding?
Money is always a problem.
Always,
Yes.
but there is more money these days. I mean, there's some federal money coming in, as you know, you're seeing with the sidewalks. And so I know everybody's lobbying to use that money in different ways, but this is probably a time when there actually are some funds available for some things. So,
in fact, we have a whole new staff person on board who her whole job is to find additional federal monies
good.
available through the Transportation Act. So we are searching high and low for monies to be able to do more at the local level. That's where folks live, and those are the streets they experience most often. So it can't all be highway projects. It's got to be where people live and shop and go to school.
Before we wrap up tonight, I wanted to just share out with the crew here and you guys something that I learned this week that I emailed about with the Transportation Committee. And that was learning that the city actually, the city jurisdiction goes all the way up to the Spring Boulevard Bridge and includes that Spring Boulevard Bridge. And so I had been in some brief conversations with Rob Interfeld about how you guys were thinking about redesigning that stretch on Hilyard and 30th, and that was sort of on his radar because of the county project and so forth. And so we kind of wanted to put the bug in your ear. The city had no records of any seismic anything for that bridge. It hadn't been tested in the 2016 or 2018 or whenever the bridges were all inspected for that. And he had mentioned, you know, him discussing going down to one lane, eastbound on 30th, and all this sort of spells a lot of trouble for South Eugene in terms of emergency preparedness and evacuations. And so we want to make sure that that is sort of on the top of transportation planning's mind for emergency situations going on in, you know, our region. That's going to be our evacuation route for a lot of people if it's available. But a bridge collapsing or a one lane out of the city is just not going to work. And so we want to make sure that in addition to a pedestrian path being considered there, that safety and emergency preparedness is also top of the mind. Dennis?
Yeah, Jess, to me, what was most disturbing about your email was that supposedly in 2006, it went to the city's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
They did an inspection in 16 and 18 and did not do an inspection over that. And also when the county was doing their plan showing us the 30th Avenue corridor, they said it went all the way to Agate. So therefore the county was planning on doing something in the city's jurisdiction. So that like, just, it doesn't match that they're not talking to one another about this.
They're not talking, because honestly, when I talked to the county people, they didn't know about the bridge. And when I talked to the city people, they didn't know about the bridge. It was a hot potato that
Nobody's
no one
talking about it.
If you're talking about the 30th Avenue Active Transportation Corridor Study, I was on the committee, so we are talking to each other. In the next round of grant funding, we are applying for a lot of money for more seismic retrofits on bridges. And so I will bring that up to our bridge team as well for inspection.
Yeah, but like I say, it's when it was presented by the Lane County people, they talked like that was their jurisdiction, that the city wasn't going to take over till Agate Street.
That, no, okay, if they said that, that's, I don't, so Becky Taylor and Sasha Vartanian, you know, I talk with them all the time, and we've been talking about that corridor for months now, so. I think maybe they misspoke or misunderstood a question, because they know that's our stuff. In fact, we repaved it, 3 years ago? So yeah, we know whose stuff is what.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks
It's
for the
really
invite.
appreciated.
Thank you.
We were really looking forward to talking to you guys, and Catherine, we were like waiting to meet the new hire. So it's good timing, and it's really good to see you as part of the transportation team. We will, so you guys are going to follow up with a few things. It sounds like we're going to follow up with Chris, and should we plan to be in touch in a few weeks or so to touch base about those items?
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I'm going to wrap up the meeting because I'm.
Can we just at least think about the suggestion that we decrease at least by one meeting a month? Because we
Yeah.
talked about that, and we don't have to make a decision now, but if people could kind of think about, we do one night meeting a month at the end of the month, but maybe decreasing one of our meetings so that we're 2 daytime meetings, you know, kind of a compromise.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and just for Leo's benefit, we have been meeting for the most part every Wednesday at 1:15, except for these fourth Thursdays, which are meant to be more of a way to share out with any other neighborhoods who are interested. We share the invitation with them. John does that, and also encourage, you know, nighttime participation, because obviously the day is not accessible for everybody. So yeah, Linda, you want to if you want to make a proposal, and we can email back and forth about that, or how we want to do maybe every other week or something like that.
Yeah, something like that, like every other week. Because I know that the daytime meetings are challenging for people working, our parents. I have a little more time as retiree, but I'll
Yeah.
put something out.
Yeah. Yeah, and wherever there's communication gaps, you know, we're always in touch digitally. So I don't see the necessity to maybe, you know, even if there's something to say, to need to meet, but having a twice a month meeting might be completely sufficient.
Right.
That would put us on the second week and the fourth week if we keep this meeting.
Right.
Are you meeting one daytime, one nighttime each
Well,
month?
I was thinking 2 daytime, just eliminating one of them, but I'm open. That's just what I'm suggesting, but I'll need Leo's email because I don't have his.
Otherwise, I'll miss all the great email back. and
That's
forth.
right.
Oh,
Oh,
just-
just
I was
wait,
gonna say,
just
If he has
wait.
permission,
If
you
I
can
know-
add him to the Southeast Neighbors transportation.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for.
If I know
Yeah,
anything about meetings, I know that we will fill the time. So I'm in favor of, without trying to finalize or, you know, I don't know how this decision will be made ultimately, but I'll just comment that one approach is to make a more drastic reduction and then see if we feel that we are missing time. And if we are, we can always add back, right? Because if we go down a moderate amount, well, we'll use it all. So that's
Well, the other thing is that people can't always make each one. So if we have at least a number of meetings, then people can plug in when they can. So I'm kind of looking at that, you know, that situation.
There's a lot going on. It seems like a drastic reduction would be by half right now. You know, 2 a month would be a pretty, for our committee, be fairly drastic. So,
that's what I was referring to. Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
The drastic option.
yeah. Maybe try that because 1 day and 1 night meeting seems to make some poetic sense. And yeah, why don't we, do you guys want to just officially want to think on that and then?
Well, we don't have Lois here, so, you know, I would
Right.
like her to be part of the decision.
That's
So,
right. That's true.
Absolutely. Well, do you guys want to go ahead and meet on June 1st then and then decide? Or
I
we could
would.
just cancel that meeting and meet on the 8th. The 8th would be the second Wednesday, and then we would meet on the 4th Thursday, which would be the 22nd, or no, sorry, the 23rd.
I guess I was kind of thinking of the first Wednesday and the third. No, that's not right. Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Either way.
You know.
Well, let's go ahead and meet on, try and meet at 1:15 on Wednesday, June 1st. And we can kind of set our calendar up for the
Sure.
coming year.
John has a hand up.
I got a phone message from our LTD representative, Don Norden, and he left a voice message. I was just calling to check in and see how well Southeast Neighbors Committee is doing. You're probably aware we've selected a new GM. But we're
Oh,
still working out the details. If everybody agrees to everything, should know in a couple weeks. We're probably making announcements on the 15th at the next board meeting. So.
Was that today, John?
I just forwarded it to you. It was 7:07 PM. He sent that to the, or he phoned in to the Southeast Neighbors or the transportation phone number.
Interesting, right on our meeting date. Yeah, we
Jess
had
was
that.
there, right?
Well, they had the forum on Tuesday, and then as far as I was aware, they were gonna meet as a board on Wednesday with the candidates, and it sounded like, you know, try and make a decision probably. So it sounds like they did. I don't know how much, I don't know how much you can take into account everyone's written feedback from a Tuesday night meeting or whatever. I hope that was all accounted for. There were about 40 people in the room. It was packed. And people were writing on packets and whatever about all the candidates and giving feedback. And I talked to the union representatives about that and about their meeting with the candidates. And they had a favorite, and I couldn't get a read. I couldn't get the same read that he did from the candidate forum because it's all very formal. And what I was interested in is which of the 3 candidates rode the bus to their work. You know, who is actually a bus rider is one of my things that would actually show you the biggest, you know, fact about some of these. And one of them does out of the 3. And it was the same one that the union wanted. So anyway, I'm hoping that's the one they picked.
We'll see you on the 1st and we'll figure things out.
Yeah, I gotta go because I have a fever.
Yeah.
well, thanks for coming.
Yes,
Jess.
yes.
You talked more than
down.
you talked more than we expected you to.
Yeah,
Yeah, I kind of rallied. I'll probably fall asleep. So.
good. You need the rest. Tea with
Okay.
honey.
I just want to say thanks, Jess, and thanks to all of y'all on the SEN Transportation Committee. Your work is great. I'm so glad I came to this meeting, but I'll try to make a few more. So
Great.
thanks for all
Thanks.
y'all.
Good to have you.
You bet.
Thank you guys for coming. Bye,
Yep.
guys.
Bye-bye. Good night, everyone.